What do CEOs need to know about sales these days? A lot. Outdated sales strategies and tactics plague most companies today. Listen to what innovative CEOs and experts have to say about how to change all that with Sales Talk for CEOs. Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. I am broadcasting today from Noble Studios in downtown Reno because I had no internet today. And my good friend Jared, who you heard on my podcast a couple weeks ago, said, come on down to my office. So here I am. So if my surroundings look different, that's why. I have an amazing guest today, as always. We all know that the deals are getting harder out there, right? The complex sale is getting more complex. There's so much going on in the buyer's mind, and there are so many people involved, in a deal these days that sometimes it gets just really hard for salespeople and sales teams to track on it. And so we need tools today that help us help the buyer, right? We want to make it easier for the buyer to buy from us. And in order to do that, we have to make things transparent, and we have to make it so that they feel like they're part of the process. We're not just selling to them, right? Because it's all about the customer experience. So today we're going to talk with Mark Fershteyn. He is the CEO and founder of Recapped, and he has built an incredible tool that is going to allow you to provide a better buyer experience from hello to I'm your loyal customer. Welcome, Mark.
Much. What an amazing pitch. I might have to steal some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, before we get to the story, just tell us in your own words, briefly, what does Recap really provide to the people who use it?
Yeah, thank you. I think you really hit the nail on the head, right? In today's environment, we're no longer in a world where you can pour money into the top of the funnel and just run the playbook that we always ran, right? Oh, we're going to spend X amount of money. We're going to close 20% of business. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, right? That's not the case. And so what we really do is we help sellers consistently execute a Michelin star experience for their buyers instead of a fast food experience, right? And we do that by really making it easy for sellers to follow the sales process, but more importantly, adapt it to the needs of their buyers, which you hit on so well in the earlier segment. The way we do that is by creating a collaborative deal room. So instead of having a million emails and spreadsheets and PowerPoint slides and Salesforce notes and sticky notes or whatever else we're doing, you can consolidate everything in one place. You can invite every stakeholder on both sides of the table, and you can collaborate together, because what you mentioned is so key. Your buyer wants what you have, right? And sales should be a collaborative effort. It shouldn't be something that you just slam down their throat trying to convince them to do something. The reason people buy is because they're solving a problem. And if you have something that does that, you need to work together to get consensus and to help build those champions.
Absolutely. And it just eliminates so much of the, hey, can you send me that deck again? Or, do we have,
Yeah.
which deck did we send them? Or who else needed this and didn't get it, right? It's in the portal. Just go there. Everything's there. They can share it with whoever they need to. So I really love that. And, as an expert in the complex sale for over 20 years now, I'm always looking for ways that we can make it easier for our buyers to buy from us. And I think that's really the key. If CEOs today stay focused on that, things will go so much better. But when we get too buried in our own sales process and, really our internal workings, it just doesn't work anymore at all. Buyers are just too savvy. They're too busy. They're overwhelmed. They don't want it. They want us to make it easy for them. And that is exactly what Recapped does. So I want to know, our listeners want to know, how did you get the idea to start this company? Like, where did it all begin? So take us back to
Yeah.
what were you doing right before you started the company? And how did this idea come about, and how did you start?
Yeah. So I think let's take it back even before, right? My last role, because I started in sales right out of college. This was, 15 or so years ago, and started as an SDR working at Citrix, ended up moving my way up as an AE sales manager. But I'll be honest, I struggled a lot as a seller initially. I was putting in the work, I was outworking everyone, but my results weren't converting. And I ended up almost getting pipped at one point. And so I loved the job. I really wanted to be successful. And so I had a really kind of come to Jesus moment where I sat down and spent a week looking at what are the top reps that are doing and what am I doing that's differently, because I think I'm doing a great job. And I realized I was too focused on the art of sales and not the science of sales. Right? I was trying to get all flashy and be the best presenter, but 80-90% of sales is just the blocking and tackling. It's the follow-ups, it's the system, it's the playbook, it's the repeatable process. And I am not naturally a really organized and process-driven person. And so I had to really force myself to do that. And one of the ways I did that was by project managing my deals, literally creating mutual action plans and spreadsheets where here's the timelines, here's the next steps, here's who's responsible for what, and collaborating with my customers on that. And it was really tedious, it was really manual, but it worked. And all of a sudden I started 150, 250%, 300% of quota a year later, all
Yeah,
because
I love
I
that.
get
I love that. You got smart. You figured it out. You're like, hey, I got to have a mutual action plan and they've got to be a part of it. It's not something I do, it's something we do together.
exactly. All right.
Yeah,
And
and I'm
then
gonna say this too, you are one of the few, right, CEOs that I talk to and that I've worked with over my career of many years, that has come up from the sales ranks, right? So CEOs sometimes, they're engineers or they invented something or they're, from another department, operations. They've had some other experience besides sales. So it's always fun to talk to a CEO who really understands sales.
well, thank you. It's sometimes I do wish I kind of came at it from like an engineering mind or, but that's what I have my co-founder for. But I genuinely think everyone needs to learn sales. It is such an incredible skill and literally the lifeblood of most businesses. And if you don't have sales, you're not going to keep your lights on that long. So
I
we've
would
been
agree.
fortunate.
So, okay, throughout this long sales career, you recognized that some things were missing. They weren't provided to you by your company. You figured out how to do it yourself,
Yep.
and it worked. So then, fast forward to the job you had just previous to starting the company.
Yeah. So then I was a VP of sales out in the Bay, small startup called App Academy. We were doing it was a coding boot camp, really revolutionized kind of the pay upon success education that we're now seeing. So, which I think is how education should be in general, but that's a tangent. Uh, and I realized that, I had a big team. And again, I saw former versions of myself. My top players 40, 45 of them. My top 5 were all very process driven, right? I had one rep, Brittany, when I was at Citrix. She was the most organized person I've ever met. And so I kind of became obsessed with this project of just cloning Brittany. And I took back kind of my mutual action plan templates. I brought on a contractor that paid them out of pocket. They built a first version of Recapped for me. And it worked. It was not the prettiest, it wasn't the fastest, but we started closing deals faster. We started closing more of them, and the buyer experience went through the roof.
Right? The buyers really loved it. And that is the key that tells us, right? This is
Yes.
going to work. So you really built it before you left the company.
Yeah, and then I posted about it on Facebook. 10 of my friends start using it. They're all in sales. People start asking me how much this costs. They're sending me support emails. I'm like, I have a job. I didn't think I would start this business. And right time, right place. And I ended up quitting my job and going full time into this.
Wow. So sometimes I call people like you and myself as well, accidental entrepreneurs. We just
Yeah.
did something and it was so good that everybody wanted it and it had to be a business, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, I knew I'd always start a business. I didn't think it would be this, right? Because I don't think I realized how big of a pain I was really solving. I just took
Mhm.
it for granted as like, oh, this is just something I have. But then when I zoomed out and realized like every sales team struggles with this,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Every sales team does. And it's so interesting to me today, the companies that I work with, and then, just what I hear on LinkedIn and from people that I know who are in sales, they're just still not fully understanding that the customer experience has to change if they want to close more deals, that they have to be more focused on
yeah.
the customer and the way they buy and the transparency, right? And making it easy. I think we're getting there. We are definitely not there yet. So plenty of room for tools like this. All right,
Yeah.
so you've got this, you decide, okay, I'm going to leave the company. Was that scary? I mean, how did that work out?
It was, but thankfully I'd put away a little bit of money because it was either I was going to buy a house or I would dump it into a startup, and thankfully it was right time, right place. I actually, funny at the time, showed it to one of my good friends in San Francisco who's an engineer, and I was like, "Hey, this is a little project I'm working on. What are your thoughts?" He has background in marketing as well, so he comes from a unique blend, and immediately he's like, "I love this, but the engineers that you've been paying, they've been ripping you off and they took 6 months to do what I could probably do in a week and a half." And I called him out on it. I was like, listen, if you can rebuild this better in a week and a half, we're starting this together. And about a week and a half later, we had a new version. And
Oh my
he
gosh,
came on.
amazing.
He's been amazing.
All right. So now you've already had some interest, right? People were asking you if they could buy it, if you
Yeah.
could help them, all of that, right? But you got to get your first sales done, right? So you get it built and it's built, but you had to make it look a little better. Maybe user interface and stuff, I imagine, was upgraded at that point with your
Yeah.
co-founder. And so now you're like, wow, this looks pretty good. I think we can get out there and really sell it. Or were you kind of selling it while he was building it?
It's actually a really good question. If I could go back in time, I would have had more confidence from day one to sell because I kept thinking that we weren't feature complete. But I think we
Mm.
were feature complete and we had a product that delivered immense value almost from day one. But I think as a product focused CEO, I kept thinking, oh, this is going to be another, this next feature will help for us. But I think if we would have fully embraced it from day one, we would have been further along because we were the first vendor in our space. Right? This was 5 years ago. Now we have competitors that are, starting to enter the space. We probably have 15, 20 of them. But at the time, because it was building a new category, like I don't think that we had the confidence. And that's one of the biggest things I wish I would have done differently.
It's an interesting thing you bring up about the confidence because that it is something I've talked to other founders about, right? At the beginning, you're thinking, wow, especially when you're in a brand new category, right? Eh, is anybody out there? Are they really going to take hold of this? Is it going to work, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of maybe tread with a little bit more caution than you would have if you were entering a marketplace that was already developed, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, so you're moving along there. You decide eventually you're thinking, okay, it's good enough. I'm going to go start selling. So, how did that go?
Yeah. Well, we were selling from day one, or very close to it, but I don't think we really doubled down on it. We were kind of letting people come to us. After that, um, we weren't fundraising. So we were bootstrapped from day one. One of our customers, actually, one of the very first early customers, they came to us from a LinkedIn post that I posted uh, about the sales process and the experience and everything else that we talked about. And they were so impressed. They actually got their leadership team together, created an LLC, and invested 500,000 into us. And
Oh,
that was just, yeah, it was mind blowing. One of the most humbling experiences I think I've ever been a part of. And so we took that money and then we ended up bringing on two more engineers and we brought on another account executive who unfortunately didn't work out. But, he sold right beside me. And we did that for better part of a year.
yeah. All right. So, you get these first customers coming in, and you want to really make sure their experience is good, right? Because that's what your product
Yeah.
is all about, right? So, you're using your own method that you
Yeah.
built, right, to bring in these new customers. And then as you onboarded them and got them using the product, how was the user adoption going and what kind of work were you doing for that?
Yeah, so a lot of manual effort in the beginning, right? Learning about their process, trying to figure out what they're trying to solve. And at the time, because we didn't have, we didn't know what to label ourselves or what to call ourselves as, right? We went down this proposal tool route. We went because we were trying to attach ourselves to something that was already existing, right? So we're like, is it a collaboration tool? Is it a project management tool? So we had all of these different customers, and they all had different use cases and different things that they cared about. And so I think we were being pulled in a lot of different directions in the early days. And until we actually sat down and realized, okay, let's stay true to our vision and why we built this and double down on that, then we started seeing repeatability. And all in all, with all of those customers, it was a lot of go into their office. I took a couple flights, met with people, watched them, literally like sat over there behind their desk, watching how they're doing things, and just getting their feedback. And one thing I wish we would have also done earlier is invested more time in onboarding, because
Mm,
everyone was telling us how easy the tool was. And it seemed really easy to get up and running. But one thing we underestimated is the change management that was involved and required for this.
yeah.
And we ended up having some customers that ended up turning out that I think would have been fantastic fits, but we took it at face value and they told us they're good and, we're good. And then all of a sudden you look 3-4 months later and their engagement has dropped, and re-winning a deal at that point is very, very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that it's such an important thing. But in the early days when you're trying to scale and like you said, hey, it was easy and people are telling you, yeah. But that user adoption is so important. So it sounds like you got a hold of that though, and you figured out how to onboard them better. So now you're, a couple of years in and you're growing. Did you start to build a sales team, or at what point did you realize, okay, it can't just be me selling and this one
Yeah.
person sitting beside me, we've got to sell more faster.
Yeah. So we, after the pre-seed round where we raised $500,000 from our customer, we also brought on a couple angel checks. Behind the scenes, one of those angels ended up actually talking to formal investors for us. And this was the peak of 22, 22. And we ended up raising 5.5 million on a seed. And the team went from 7 people to about 26 people in a matter of 9 to 12 months. So we
Wow.
hired 6 BDRs, 3 AEs, 2 CSMs. We went wild.
Wow. Wow. Gosh, I don't even know how you hire that many people that fast, right? It's a lot of work to hire people and
It
get
is.
the right people and get them trained and onboarded, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So okay, so now you've got this huge team. That's a big change as a CEO, right? Now you're
Yeah.
managing a lot more people, a lot more functions, a lot more processes, and you're trying to really turn up the heat on sales, right? And get things
Yeah.
scaling. So how did that work?
It did until it didn't. We okay. Um, Everything broke
Ah,
really, really quickly, right? As you can imagine, we went from me to all of a sudden everybody else selling. One thing that we didn't do a great job of was documenting the process and
ah,
downloading everything that was in my brain, essentially. And we took that for granted. We're like, oh, this tool's so easy. People are buying it left and right. They're getting up and running. We are getting money thrown at us that we weren't even fundraising. Like, how hard can this be? And I think we were a victim of our own success in that regard. And the team, I think that's really one of my biggest mistakes ultimately. And like the biggest takeaway I would give to people listening to this: you can always speed up, you can't always slow down. And what I wish we would have done in hindsight is we would have gotten the money and then we would have done what we're doing today. It's me, maybe one other person, building the repeatability, building the engine, and then scaling. Because we scaled and we ended up just piling shit on top of more shit. And it was working, but it cost us $1 to bring in 30 cents.
mm.
And when the market turned, we had to completely pivot our entire business.
Wow. All right. Well, let's talk about that market turn. When was that and what happened?
Yeah, so I guess that was beginning of what, 23? Yeah, middle of 22. Um, we we realized, we sat down, we said, listen, we can keep growing. And our investors told us, hey, if you keep growing at this rate, we'll preempt a Series A. But when the war happened and all of a sudden inflation and everything else, that changed the market economics. And we realized at that, as much as it was burning, as much as we were burning from a capital perspective, sorry, let me restart that. We were burning too much money from a capital perspective to bring in the revenue that we were bringing, and it wasn't sustainable. And we realized we were going to run out of money before we hit our targets for Series A. So unfortunately, we had to make a really tough decision. We did a layoff, we restructured the team, and we essentially cut the team in half. And I became the only seller again, and pretty much ran customer success and biz dev and everything else by myself.
So you righted the ship and you had to get your arms back around things.
Yeah. Well, and we realized at that time that for us to get as big as we really wanted to get, as to our targets, the buyer experience really matters. And for us, that meant opening the application up for product-led sales and self-service ultimately. And so we completely shifted the go-to-market as well during that time. And I'm glad that I was in the ship doing all of these calls because it put me in front of the customer and I could really learn at an accelerated rate, because when I had all those reps, I was 3 layers removed almost, or that's what it felt like.
Yeah, smart CEOs like you, they stay involved with the customer, right? And you saw what happened when you got too far removed. And I've heard the story before, right? Build up the team, kind of remove yourself from that day to day, remove yourself from the customers. Things don't go so well. You got
Yeah,
to get back in touch with the customer and hear what they're saying so you can be a product led company, right? You've got to understand what do those customers want? How are they using this? Which parts are they using more? Which parts are they not using that they should be, right? You've got to get a grip on that so you can talk with them about it and help them make the most of the tool, right?
absolutely. And there's a lot of little things, right? I mean, when you look at the funnel, it's how many people go to your website, how many people sign up, how many people create the first thing that you want them to create in your app, how many of them come back. Each of those is a funnel point, and until you literally take it one by one, it becomes so hard to kind of manage.
Yeah. All right. So here you are now. You're 5 years in, back to being the CEO and the main
Yeah.
seller, right? Uh, very close to the customer, listening and learning, shaping things really to allow yourselves to scale. So you've learned a lot. Tell us how you're going to use what you learned as you rebuild and go forward to hit those targets that you want to hit.
Yeah, great question. So, and thankfully, all of the hard work that we've done over the last year and a half has really started paying off. In Q4, I brought in just as much revenue as we've ever brought in with a full team by myself. Q1,
Congratulations. That's amazing.
thank you,
Awesome.
thank you. Q1 is looking to be, knock on wood, our one of our best quarters ever. Um, and that's with a really lean team. And so I did a lot of the things that we didn't do before. I documented everything. I used our product to map out literally the entire sales process, all the questions I ask, why I asked them, the onboarding flow. Literally every single thing is now implemented, whereas before we kind of took a lot of those things for granted. In Q2 and probably Q3, we're going to start scaling the team up pretty significantly once we hit our break even point. That's kind of the goal here immediately. We hit to profitability in the next 3 to 6 months, and then we'll be going out for a Series A. And we've I think we over indexed on product over the last couple of years, and because of that, thankfully, like when we get in competitive bake-offs, we win 85-90% of those deals. What I really want to make sure we do a great job of is distribution, marketing, sales, and essentially going to market.
Yeah. All right. So as you build this new sales team, pulling from what you learned, and of course, you were a sales leader before, so you know how to hire and
Yeah.
train, hire, onboard, and train, right? Salespeople and ongoing coaching and all of that. Bringing all of that plus what you learned as a CEO, which is different. It's different when you own the company and you're hiring people amazingly, right? As a VP,
Yeah.
it's one thing, but then when you own the company, it's a whole nother thing. And, you kind of start to recognize, wow, people's lives are at stake here, and the dollars that go out the door, it's all on me.
Yeah.
So what bringing all that into today, and as move into the next quarter and say, yeah, we're going to start hiring people, tell us about some of the things you've learned that are really going to help you hire an amazing team.
I think that's a really great question. I think before we even focus on hiring, I want to do something different this time around enabling and training and being there for the people that we hire. I think we hired some really great people, and unfortunately, we threw them into the deep end and we said, "Go swim, go figure this out." And I think they tried the best that they possibly could, but I didn't do right by them ultimately. And so this time around, I want to do that differently. So we've invested a lot more in kind of, okay, do we have the enablement? Do we have the documentation? Do we have the literature? Do we have the time to sit here and support them? Because otherwise, they're not going to be successful, and there's no point doing it. We also changed our hiring structure. So we're going to be looking for an AE soon. The first task is I'm putting my cell phone out there. They can cold call me. They can pitch me whatever they want, but I want them to book my business. It could be to watch their favorite movie. It could be to look at their product. It could be recapped. I don't care. I want to see them actually do the job. And a lot of the evaluation of hiring is going to be focused on that. So we're going to do mock discoveries, mock demos. I want to see them. I want to give them the application, or hopefully they take initiative and start using it themselves so that they could come back and pitch to me. And everything is going to be a simulation of them doing their job.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. And I think it's often so left out of the hiring process. People are always in a hurry to hire, right? And that puts us in a bad position, I believe. We need to take our time. And, I know that, especially with sales, these people, when they're out of a job, if they're good, they won't be out of a job long. And they're going to,
Yeah.
hurry, of course, to get rehired at a place that they are going to be able to be successful. But I always tell people to slow down and take the time to really get to know each other and see, is this a good fit for both sides? I know you need a job, but we want you to be part of our team. So that's different than a job, right? So we need you to really think about the fit, the people, the product, the customers. Are these the kind of customers you want to sell to, would enjoy selling to? Is this the type of product that you believe in and you feel can really help people? Like, those are important things. And then once you've got that, it's like, okay, well, let's see what you can do. Show me. Don't
Yeah.
tell me that you know how to sell. Show me that you know how to sell. And I think that we choose better and they choose us better when they get to have those experiences before we all start making decisions, right?
Yeah. Well, I love what you said, because so many people are just really good at interviewing and, you know, good at BSing ultimately. Right. For us, one of our culture values is zero bullshit. And I would rather, whether it's a customer, whether it's an applicant, I would rather us to realize that this is not a good fit than go in with false expectations and then get mad 2 months in. Right. So like I have my views on work-life balance. It probably doesn't agree with what a lot of people think today. Uh, we're very upfront about that, right? If you want to work a 9 to 6, really easy role, this isn't going to be it. And for a lot of people, like, and I'm very upfront about that. And a lot of conversations we end up cutting really quickly because we realized we're not aligned on that. And so I
Well,
would
people say
rather,
things like, I just really don't want to work that hard. I mean, I actually
yeah,
heard somebody say that
yeah.
recently. And I'm like, well, thanks for telling me because this is not a fit.
Listen, nothing wrong with that. If you're happy, if you're doing what you need to do, you're hitting your goals,
Right?
great. That's not how we operate our business. And, I can recommend you to somebody else who wants something that you have.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that is important. If that culture is get in there and do the work, do what it takes, take the time. Some nights it's going to be, you're
Yeah.
working till 9 p.m. Sometimes, you won't be, but you've got to know the culture that you're going to go into. And if it's a culture of let's get it done, whatever it takes, you got to be the right kind of person for that.
Yeah. Well, I think too is to the other point. One thing I wish I would have done differently as well is there are times where clearly there's just not a good fit, and I think we were too nice in a lot of instances where we tried everything possible to get this candidate to be good and tailor the position around them. Where in hindsight, I wish I would have said, okay, we're 2 months in, we're 3 months in, this isn't working out. Let's end this amicably and let's go from here. Um, so I think hire slow and fire fast. If I had a
Yeah, 100%. I could not agree more. And I have helped coach a lot of CEOs into that mindset, especially with sales. You need to let them go fast
Yeah,
because you you set it up for success. I mean, granted, if you feel like, oh, I didn't set this person up for success, then yes, you need to reset and give them more of a chance. And especially in your case where you now know what success looks like, you know how to set them up for success. They understand what the expectations are. They either do the job or they don't. It doesn't mean they come in and start selling immediately. It means they're doing the things that will set them up and build their pipeline so that in the amount of time that's reasonable, they will be able to start
yeah,
closing some deals. And we can see whether they're doing that or not. It's really apparent. But as humans, we want to give them another chance, all this stuff. But it's like, hey,
Yeah.
gosh, I see that, you're not doing the things that will make you successful. Let's reset. You got 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Let's see if you can do it. Do you need any help from me? Do you need some retraining? What do you need? And at the end of 2 weeks, let's look at it and decide. And maybe this just isn't for you anymore, and that's perfectly fine. But if it is for you, let's do it, right? Let's do
Yes.
it. And then at the end of that 2 weeks, it's like, oh, they've made some progress. Great. Let's take another 2 weeks and look at that, right? Or zero progress. Hey, that's a sign. It's like, hey, I think we should set you off onto your next adventure so you can be successful somewhere.
Yeah. I love that. I think sales, unf for better or for worse, I think salespeople fire themselves, right? You are in direct control of your destiny. If you are behind your number, you need to pick up the phone and make more dials.
Yep.
And if someone on the team can do it, then it can be done, right? Now, if you're all joining at the same time and it's never been done, and we don't even know if there's any fit at all, like that's different. Um,
Right.
and to that point, actually, it reminds me of a story. We had um, someone on our team who we sat down, and we had that conversation, but the turnaround was going to be so hard. I gave them the option. I said, listen, here's all the stuff that we're going to be able to do. If you don't want to do that, I totally understand. Here's a package that, will make it really easy for you. And they actually ended up taking the package. I was surprised. But I was like, you know what? It's better that at least I'm really glad I gave them the choice, because otherwise we're going to sit here trying to fit a square peg into a round hole and everyone's just going to be miserable.
No, and that's why I think it should never be a surprise. Like, people should know their numbers, right? They should know
Yeah.
what the expectations are. And either you're doing it or you're not. And if you need
Yes.
help, ask for it. And if it's just not for you, just come and tell me. It's no problem. Maybe there's another role for you at this company, or maybe we set you off, on a new adventure and we recommend you to someone else to do what you do well. But I think fear really binds us sometimes, right? The fear of people not liking us, the fear of letting them go too soon. But what if they would have gotten better after a couple more weeks, or whatever it is? The
Yeah.
fear is what binds us. And we got to let go of it. And we just have to be real human. And I think very forthcoming. It's like, hey, this is what the job is. This is how we measure it. You're not
Yeah.
doing it. What do you want to do?
If I had my way, we would have a leaderboard for every department, including engineers, including everyone, uh, because I believe in radical transparency ultimately. Like, there's
Yeah.
just life's too short. We don't need to sit here and tiptoe around. Like, just treat each other the way that we want to be treated, and things should align ultimately.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, you are really in a great place right now to watch your company get to the next level. I'm very
Thank
excited
you.
for you, and I will be keeping my eye on you to see what happens next. And of course, if there's anything I can do to help you in that journey, you certainly should let me know. But let's tell our audience where they can find you, because I'm sure a lot of people think, wow, Recap sounds pretty good. I probably want to look into it, right?
Yeah, thank you, and again for having me. This has been a fantastic conversation, and vice versa. Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn, Mark Fershteyn. You can also just email me, mark@recap.io, as well as just going to recapped.io. There's a bunch of free resources, free templates, blog posts. If you have any questions around executing a better sales process or delivering a better experience, please let us know. I think in this market, it's really the only thing we can truly control. Can't control much else, but we can control how the experience that we leave our buyers with ultimately.
Yes, I agree with you. We certainly can control that. And thank you again for taking the time to be on the show today. Really appreciate it. And we'll stay in touch.
Thank you, Alice.